Welcome to our deep dive into the Cold War, a period of geopolitical tension that lasted from the end of World War II in 1945 until the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. This era was defined by political, military, and ideological rivalry between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Let's explore the key events and figures that shaped this critical period in modern history. The origins of the Cold War can be traced back to the closing days of World War II. The United States, led by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and the Soviet Union, under Premier Joseph Stalin, were allies against Nazi Germany. However, their relationship began to sour as they disagreed on the post-war reconstruction of Europe. At the Yalta and Potsdam conferences, tensions arose over the fate of Eastern Europe. Stalin sought to establish a sphere of influence to protect Soviet interests, while the US and its allies aimed to promote democratic governance. This ideological clash set the stage for the Cold War. In 1946, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill famously declared that an Iron Curtain had descended across Europe, dividing the Free West from the Communist East. The US responded with the Truman Doctrine in 1947, pledging to support nations threatened by communism. This policy marked the beginning of America's strategy of containment, aimed at preventing the spread of Soviet influence. To rebuild war-torn Europe and counter Soviet expansion, the United States launched the Marshall Plan in 1948. This ambitious program provided over $12 billion in economic aid to Western European countries, helping to restore their economies and solidify their alliance with the US. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union established the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, or Comecon, to bind Eastern Europe to its economic system. In 1948, the Soviet Union attempted to force the Western Allies out of Berlin by blockading all ground access to the city. In response, the United States and its allies organized the Berlin Airlift, supplying the city by air for nearly a year. The successful airlift was a significant victory for the West and underscored the resolve of the Allies to resist Soviet pressure. In 1949, the United States and 11 other Western nations formed the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, a military alliance aimed at countering Soviet aggression. In response, the Soviet Union and its Eastern Bloc allies established the Warsaw Pact in 1955. These alliances formalized the division of Europe and heightened the military standoff between East and West. The Cold War saw an unprecedented arms race, as both superpowers amassed vast arsenals of nuclear weapons. The Soviet Union's successful test of an atomic bomb in 1949 ended the United States' monopoly on nuclear power. This escalation led to the development of even more destructive hydrogen bombs. The competition extended into space with the Soviet launch of Sputnik, the first artificial satellite, in 1957. The United States responded by establishing NASA and prioritizing space exploration, culminating in the Apollo moon landings. One of the most perilous moments of the Cold War occurred in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The discovery of Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. After tense negotiations, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev agreed to remove the missiles in exchange for a US pledge not to invade Cuba and the removal of American missiles from Turkey. While the superpowers avoided direct military confrontation, they engaged in numerous proxy wars to expand their influence. The Korean War, from 1950 to 1953, saw US-led UN forces clash with North Korean and Chinese troops. In Vietnam, the US fought a protracted and controversial war to prevent the spread of communism. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 further illustrated the global reach of the Cold War. The 1970s saw a period of détente, or easing of tensions, highlighted by strategic arms limitation talks, or SALT, and President Richard Nixon's historic visit to China. However, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and the election of Ronald Reagan, who took a hardline stance against the Soviet Union, led to a renewed period of tension in the 1980s. The Cold War began to wind down in the late 1980s as Soviet Premier Mikhail Gorbachev introduced reforms such as glasnost, meaning openness, and perestroika, meaning restructuring. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 symbolized the collapse of Soviet control in Eastern Europe. In 1991, the Soviet Union itself dissolved, bringing an end to the Cold War. The Cold War left an indelible mark on global history, shaping political, military, and cultural landscapes across the world. Its legacy continues to influence international relations today. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of the most pivotal eras of the 20th century. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more historical documentaries. Until next time, stay curious.